Coming up in this episode of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast, I have this amazing opportunity to...
Surprise! No more Mark this episode, bitches! This is actually going to be called the Rebel Reflections episode. Shall we continue, perhaps? Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, bookseller, and trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writing journey. Okay. Enough rebelling for 2 seconds. Let's be serious and you do your personal update and your comments. We cannot forget your listeners. It's important.
Okay, so, hi, hello, hello, rebels, hello, rebellious, reflective rebels, okay, all right, that'll do, right, okay, so, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I'm, temporarily, your host again. Wait, can I call myself the host, at least temporarily?
Completely up to you.
Okay, good. So, as you can tell, this is Sacha Black has taken over the Stark Reflections podcast. It's part of a celebration for her 1-year anniversary, which is really, really awesome. But, I'm digressing again. I am supposed to be doing comments from recent episodes and a personal update. So, let me start with comments from recent episodes. In episode 154, which was Memories of and Reflections of T.S. Paul, Caro said, "I'm so sorry to learn that T.S. Paul passed away. I have very fond memories of hanging out with him and his wife at various conferences. I'll miss him. He was great at taking the marketing paths less traveled and was always willing to chat and share what was working for him with his fellow authors. Thank you, Mark, for taking the time to have a special podcast episode and bring back some golden nuggets that he had previously shared with you. I will miss his generosity, enthusiasm, and zest for life. I still remember the wonderful lunch we had at a Mexican restaurant in Austin one year, and he picked up the tab for everyone who attended. Rest in peace, my friend." Carol, thank you so much for that comment. I actually remember, I think the very first meal I had with Scott and Heather, they picked up the tab as well. Amazingly generous and wonderful people. And thank you for those very kind words in memory of Scott. Episode 144, Wide for the Win with Aaron Wright. Kev left this comment. He said, "I like what Aaron has to say, and as someone who is in the process of switching some of my books wide, I'm going to take her tips very seriously. However, while I respect her actively anti-Amazon point of view, I don't share it. I'm retailer neutral, and I certainly don't regard Amazon as a bigger bad guy than, say, Apple or Google. I'm only interested in wide from the commercial point of view and as a way of serving my readers, not to stick it to Amazon. I'm very grateful for page reads since at the moment they pay my mortgage, so I will be taking the journey to wide very gently." Thanks so much for the comments, Kevin. And I completely get that, actually, because I tend to not think of Amazon as evil or purposely trying to hurt or harm authors because they're just a giant corporation. I tend to think of them more as a giant stepping on ants without even realizing how many little people are getting killed in their wake, if you'll allow me to mix metaphors. So I am not anti-Amazon, but I am anti having to be dependent upon Amazon. I know they're paying your mortgage and plenty of other authors' mortgages, but I fear being too dependent on a single retailer and love the diversification of my income, which is why I love the Wide for the Win mentality of having multiple streams so that if something happens to one of them, you're not 100% dependent. But thank you, Kev, for that response. And I know everyone has their own approach to that. And that's what I love is that's the independent author spirit, is completely deciding what works best for you and how you plan on approaching it. For comments, I thought I'd also share a comment from Joanna Penn on one of the Stark Reflections on Other podcasts, which is a special type of episode that appears for my patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And Jo is a patron, so she gets those and occasionally leaves comments on those episodes over at patreon.com/starkreflections. I just said that, didn't I? Anyways, in a September 2nd, 2020 episode of this special patron-only podcast, I reflected on episode 190 of the Writer's Well podcast. Now, that's a podcast hosted by Jay Thorne and Rachel Herron, two amazing authors I have tremendous respect for. And in the comments to that episode, Joanna said this: "Thanks, Mark. I also talked about my thoughts on my show. I also think it's important to look at things we've been doing that used to work and no longer work, or work in a different way. I should go back and say that this is an episode where Rachel and Jay talked about ending the podcast and why and when to say no and stuff like that. So Joe's reflecting on the same things that I did, which I love. I love hearing other folks' reflections. So to continue with Joanna's comment, she said, for example, I started using Twitter in 2009 because it was the new social media and it was fantastic. It's probably how we met the first time. And I met Orna Ross and other people who are now friends in real life. And that's true. Joe did, I think we did meet on Twitter, and Orna as well. It's so great that those can be cultivated. Joe goes on to say, I still love Twitter, but I use it at about 10% of what I used to. I don't assume traffic from it anymore, just networking. I also use Instagram more to prove I am a real human at JFPennAuthor than for any marketing. In fact, I'm pretty much at the point where I would give up social media before anything else. The current crazy world makes this even more so. But I am not giving it up at the moment, just what I used to use it for. I also gave up blogging last year and guest posts, and like you, I use podcasting as my primary content marketing. I occasionally blog, but very, very infrequently. I'm also getting better at saying no to all kinds of speaking stuff, even just Zoom stuff, as it is still tiring. What else can we give up, she asks. Thanks as ever. Really, really amazing points. And I do take your lead on a lot of these things, Joe, in terms of recognizing what are the things you can't do. And again, you want to help people, you want to take time for things you want to share, but sometimes you actually have to say no in order to say yes to other things that you need to do, because sometimes when you say yes to something else or someone else and their desires and wishes and the things, even if it's a good thing, even if it's a positive thing, it usually means you can't say yes to something else that you have in your plate, because we can only do so many things at a time, and that's really, really important. So saying no isn't because you're mean or evil or any of those things. It just means that's part of prioritizing. As always, great words of advice from Joanna Penn. And you, dear listener, if you are not already listening to her amazing The Creative Penn podcast, do yourself a huge, huge favor and go check it out. And now over to my personal update. So in the personal update, I'm ecstatic that my Kickstarter for the Obsessions anthology, which I've talked about in previous episodes, it came to a close earlier today as I'm recording this, which is Thursday, September 24th. And I'm thrilled that it not only hit its first stretch target of getting 6 cents a word for the authors, but it hit the second stretch target where it received more than $7,000 US, which meant I now had the funds to pay the authors for audio rights as well as pay for the production of the audiobook. And I'm going to publish that through Findaway Voices. And what I'm going to do for that, because it's 16 different stories, I'm going to try to use, if I can, at least a half dozen different narrators, different voices, male, female, and really try to spice that up and try to get the right voice for each of the stories. There's going to be duplicates, obviously, because of just all the moving parts, but I'm really thrilled about that, and I'm really thrilled. So thank you guys, anyone who supported that Kickstarter campaign. It was a really thrilling and it took a lot of work and time and energy and sweat. But I did that, and amazing support from Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith for the writing course that they added to that, which is an amazing horror story writing course. And also I received a call from Michael Anderle when he saw that I was looking to get to the second stretch goal, and he said, well, how can I help? And he saw the $666 option where you could get killed in a fictional story. And he said, he's joked around about it being in poor taste for me to kill people, especially during a pandemic. But then he thought that could be kind of fun. So he went and purchased one of those. And then he reached out to a couple other friends, Dakota Kraut and Mike Bray. And they both run a successful publishing company. So Michael is LMBPN Publishing, and Dakota Kraut is Mountain Hill Press, and oh my God, Mike Bray, I'm drawing a blank on his publishing company, but they're all publishing companies who have helped kickstart so many different authors' careers and allow people to write as full-time authors. Amazing people. And I get to kill them all in fiction. So that's going on. Those stories I'll be working on in early 2021. Those will be things that'll be published next year. And I have to interview them and get details so I can actually kill them properly in the fictions that I'm going to be writing. I have another story I'm writing for another Kickstarter. My friend Robert Jashonik has Space 1975. And I have a title for the story I'm going to write, and I have to get that into him by the middle of October. That's so the illustrator can get it done, and he can get that ready for his anthology. I'm thrilled that there's authors like Peter David, who, I mean, I first encountered his writing in Spider-Man comics years ago, and I get to be in an anthology with him. This is kind of cool. I'm living the dream. But my story is going to be Death by Vacuum Disco. That's the tentative title I have right now. And I get to actually kill another Michael, who you may remember from Michael Lucas from a few episodes back. I know Michael through writing circles, and there was a joke about him supporting it, and there's a bunch of people who are going to get written into the story, so I'm actually going to kill him in a Death by Vacuum Disco story. So that's going to be a fun thing that I do for personal. But another personal update quickly, since, Sacha's she's still letting me do this. She is the relaunch of the Canadian Werewolf books, and I want to share this. These are not comments, but they're kind of from a personal update. So I got some amazing reviews from a Canadian Werewolf in New York. I actually got a phone call from somebody who lives in New York who just phoned me and said, I picked up the book last night. I couldn't put it down. I finished it. I had to call you. Loved it. Went on and on. Loved. I hate getting phone calls like that, but it was so amazing to hear how much she loved that book. And so some of the reviews that I've received recently on the Canadian Werewolf, because of that launch I did and talked about back in episode 150, is I'm now starting to get those reviews. And so here are just some of the reviews or clips from reviews that I've received. Thanks to Mark Leslie, the werewolf storyline has been rescued. His skill is in portraying the day-to-day life of a werewolf from the point of view of the human side. We actually do not ever see the transformed image of man into wolf. Rather, we see the day-to-day trauma of a man cursed, or perhaps blessed, with the superhuman senses and strength of an animal. Another review called it a tongue-and-jowl werewolf story. Another one said, coming from a werewolf-obsessed individual, I really enjoyed this book with its different take on the werewolf character and how he deals with being a werewolf. I highly recommend this. And I'm sharing that not to pat myself on the back, but to remind you that this was about the relaunch. This book was originally released in 2016. And now the book is getting read because I rebranded. I got the new covers done, and so sort of re-kicked it and did some marketing to get it in front of people. So now that it's actually getting more readers, now it's getting more rave reviews, and it's kind of like stirred life back into it. So I guess the reflection or the mini reflection there is, if you have something, a new book is a book that somebody has not read before, and you can still resurrect old books where the sales may have dried up a little bit with a new cover, new branding, etc. So that's something for you to consider. And now over to the ad reads for this podcast. If you're looking for ways to get your audiobook into the audiobook market quickly and efficiently and to the widest global distribution, look no further than Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is great for independent authors and small publishers alike looking to distribute. But if you're also looking for a professional narrator, they've got you covered. As a matter of fact, they've got you covered with all kinds of things you may not be able to get elsewhere, such as pricing control, coupon codes for free downloads for early readers, all kinds of bonuses. Findaway Voices is a really amazing tool that has empowered me as an indie author to get my work into so many different markets. And I've been selling a lot of my audiobooks through the library market through Findaway Voices. If you want to look for ways at how you can leverage Findaway Voices for your author journey, check out starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And that was a word from the episode's first sponsor. Now, a word from this episode's second sponsor. This podcast is also sponsored by the Rebel Author Podcast, with a huge celebratory happy first anniversary, Sacha Black. One of the things I love most about the Rebel Author Podcast, apart from its awesome Rebel host, is the guest Rebel of the Week spot that Sacha has on the podcast. I love that she gets to feature different listeners who share their own stories and how they're different rebels in different ways in their lives. It's always a really, really fun feature. I kind of love Sacha's approach and her, I don't give a crap attitude, which is kind of like, I'm going to go forward and I've got this, I'm going to do this. And I love that. And I know that's a bit of a persona that we all put on. Like, I've got the skulls and all the stuff in my look and feel. Whereas if you actually hear me talking one-on-one or whatever, I'm not quite as confident as I pretend to be or project myself to be. But I love that and Sacha and I talk a little bit about this in the episode you're about to hear, or the interview you're about to hear. But I think one of the things I really appreciate about this podcast is the rebel spirit and the idea of trying new things or forging your own path. And Sacha Black is not only phenomenal at this, but she's also phenomenal at inspiring this in others, and just an amazing host. So do check out the Rebel Author Podcast. As well, she has some amazing books. She is the author of 13 Steps to Evil, 10 Steps to a Hero, and Anatomy of Prose. Amazing books on the craft of writing for writers. And if you can't get enough Sacha, and after having heard her on previous episode of this podcast, as well as in this episode, I encourage you to check out the Rebel Author Podcast and her other podcast, which she co-hosts, called the Level Up Author Podcast. And you can check out more about Sacha Black over at sachablack.co.uk. And that's Sacha with a C.
Hello, Rebel Reflectives. My name is Sacha Black, and I am taking over Mark's awesome podcast because I've reached a 1-year anniversary in my own podcasting journey, and Mark is the king of reflections. And what better time to reflect on your podcasting, your journey, than at a 1-year anniversary. So I've got some questions that I'm going to throw at Mark today, and hopefully he'll let me answer them too. Wait, no, he will, because I demand to answer the questions too. So shall we kick off?
Well, I thought I was going to ask the questions back to you, because that's just part of being a rebel, right? Because I'm learning from you as well, right?
Yeah, okay, fair enough. We'll do it to and fro. Okay, so very first question: who is your favorite rebel in history?
Now, this is probably related to the fact that I just finished listening to White Fragility, and I've been thinking a lot about Black Lives Matter movement.
I think we're going to have the same person.
Rosa Parks. Did you get the same? Really?
Yeah.
When I think about Rosa Parks, she doesn't just represent quiet resistance to bullshit. And I thought about what she did and how small it was, but how big a thing it was. But also the other thing, because as a white male, I'm very, very, very privileged. As a white straight male, I have all the privileges that you could possibly have, and I'm tall, like I have everything except hair. But when I think about that, I also think it's also women's power, right? So she represents more than one kind of thing that's important. So you had Rosa Parks, dude. That is hilarious.
Yeah, that is hilarious. But and actually, funnily enough, for a lot of the same reasons. So to me, I wanted to pick a woman. So I always knew I was going to be picking a woman,
right.
Partly because, female power. Also, I'm a bit of a rebel, and it's my 1-year anniversary, and I'm a woman, so I was picking a girl. But also for very similar reasons to you, the act of not giving somebody your seat on a bus is actually a very small act, but because of who she was and because of her skin color, she changed the world. And that is what I love about those small acts of rebellion. Whilst the physical act of not getting up might be a small thing, it just ballooned into this enormous revolution that changed the world. And it's just the most perfect depiction of power and the power that each individual has. And that's why I love her and her rebellion act. So yeah, I can't believe we chose the same one.
Separated at birth, I tell you.
I know,
even
right?
though I'm older than you.
Okay, so
we're rebellious twins. That's what it is.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well,
now I'm going to ask the next question.
Oh, okay, cool.
So who's your favorite literary rebel?
This is so hard because there are. So I actually have like a huge list, and I'm not going to tell you the whole list because obviously we just need to keep it small. And so I'm going to pin it down to 3, and I'm going to give you the reason. So the first one is Justin Richardson and Peter Parnell, and they wrote And Tango Makes Three, which is a kids' book all about unusual families, specifically in this instance, LGBT families. Now, this book got banned in like so many states, so many countries. It caused chaos, and yet the act of creating a story about difference and about different families gives people like me who is you know, on the LGBT in the LGBT world with a child, it gives my son something to feel connected to and to feel community and to feel seen. And so I think there's no better rebellion than something that gives people connection. So that's why I chose them. The next one is Judy Bloom. And so she was one of my favorite authors as a young teenager. And her books are all for sort of middle grade and young adult. And they cover what seem to me like extremely normal topics, but to lots of people, they're very, very controversial. So, you know, they cover things like religion, like menstruation, masturbation, sex, falling in love. And because of that, and because they talk about them so openly and honestly, and, you know, lots and lots of people have taken, I can't think of the word, they've taken issue with her as an author. And so she is one of the, along with Stephen King, and there's one other that I've now forgotten, she is one of the most banned authors in America. And so for that reason, like, I was picking her. And the last one's super controversial because she has not written amazing fiction, in my humble opinion, but E.L. James, okay, I definitely feel like, you know, some people are going to be unhappy with this, but I don't care because I'm a rebel. Okay, so E.L. James wrote the 50 Shades of Grey series. She rebelled because it was fan fiction. Like, fan fiction's not supposed to be super famous or earn millions and millions of pounds and get, you know, film rights. And of course, it's not the quality of her prose that I am praising, but it's the rebellious act that she inspired across women. So because of her, and her books are all you know, sort of soft erotica, because of those books and because of the Kindle being very popular at the time, she created a revolution and an empowerment in women's sort of sexual confidence. And I think that is spectacular, to give a whole gender confidence and empowerment. And I love that. Wow. How about you?
That is good. I love that you rebelled against the question and gave 3 or more.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's like, here's a list.
I know, I'm so sorry.
I either was confused by the question or rebelled against the question because I didn't go with authors. Although off the top of my head, if I want to think about literary rebels, I would say Scott Sigler and Mur Lafferty, because they're 2 of the first authors who bucked the trends and moved into proved that self-publishing could work and giving away your stuff in audio, for example, to sell books. And then they both got big publishing contracts. So, and early podcasters that I admired. So, but what I went with, and there was no contest here, even though there's so many fictional characters. That's what I thought you were going for, a fictional character that you was a rebel.
Okay.
Peter Parker, Spider-Man. And I know it doesn't seem to be a rebel. However, he's a vigilante. But he's also a geeky nerd. I still feel like the geeky nerd who, like just no friends or whatever, can't get a girl, that kind of thing. That was my persona. And, even though I'm in my 50s, I still feel like a geeky 14-year-old who had these amazing powers and put on a mask to hide his identity. But when he puts on the mask, and this is something that I'm using in my own fiction now, is I'm understanding why he was such a cocky smartass when he put on the mask, because he became a different type of personality. He became that wisecracking. I mean, Deadpool takes it to a further brilliant extreme, like in the same Marvel universe. But for me, so much of my entire life is based on modeling Peter Parker. With great power comes great responsibility, but then also being able to put on that mask and fight for good in a society where that, yes, there are law enforcement officers and there's the law and stuff like that, but sometimes you need to rebel in order to protect people, in order to help society and stuff like that. So Peter Parker, again, just central to my life.
I love that. And I love Deadpool as well. He is literally one of my favorites, probably unsurprisingly one of my favorites, but yeah, I love his movies. But yeah, I like that. And also I like that you took a different stance on it, because I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, good rebellion. Is it me? Oh, it's me now, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so what have you learned since you started podcasting?
Oh God, what haven't I learned? The reason I podcast is to continue to learn, by getting to talk to people like you and just understanding as many different perspectives as I can. Yeah. What have I learned? I've probably learned more in the 2+ years since I started, my own podcast, but I've been podcasting before then. I've probably learned as much from the podcast as I did in the previous 20 years. Of working in the business. How about you?
I love that.
What have you learned in 1 year anniversary?
Yeah, so I could reel off a list of I've learned technical things, I've learned website things, I've learned distribution things, I've learned little things about how to pitch people and reach out to people and all that stuff. But I'm not sure any of those really capture the thing that has meant the most to me, which is that I can do it. And I was so terrified for so long. And I know lots of listeners will be wanting to start a podcast and be like me from a year ago.
Right.
And I genuinely didn't think I was capable. I didn't think organizationally, I didn't think technically I'd be able to do it. I didn't think time-wise I'd be able to do it. I didn't think, I put stop barriers in my place, and told myself I couldn't do it before I'd even tried. And I think that's the biggest thing I can say to listeners is, if you love listening to podcasts, if you listen to Mark all the time, you listen to, I don't know, Joanna Penn, for example, all the time, and it's something that you adore, you love audio, then just give it a go, because I thought I couldn't do it either, and I could. So yeah, what I've learned is that podcasting is not as scary and terrifying or as difficult as you think it might be.
No, good. Yeah. And you probably learned that there are people out there that you don't know that are going to benefit from the things that you know. And I think the other message I like to share with my listeners regularly is, you're an expert in something. You have knowledge and insight. You're the best person to write your book, because you're the only one who can do it. And you have insights, no matter where you are in your writing career, that can help any other writer, including Daniel Steele, Stephen King, E.L. James, any of those authors, right? Joanna Penn, who we see as a goddess, right? In our realm, she learns from people who haven't yet published a book, and if those masters can learn, why can't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. What have you learned about yourself since starting podcasting?
So yeah, I mean, those questions kind of blended for me, which I didn't mean them to intentionally do.
But you rebelled.
Yeah, well, I'll rebel a little bit. So there is one other thing, and it's so silly, but which is why I'm going to tell you. So I am still, I apologize in advance for saying this, but I am still shit scared of telephone calls. It doesn't,
Really?
oh my God, I hate them. I absolutely hate telephone calls. And apparently,
In actual, like,
podcast.
old-fashioned telephone machine calls, not video calls.
Yeah, well, so this is the difference. In my head, these Zoom calls, these sort of Skype calls for podcasting don't count. And I don't know why. Because it's utterly, well, it should be utterly terrifying to speak to completely new people on Zoom or whatever for a podcast. But when it comes to the phone still, I will avoid calling call centers. I will avoid calling my mum. I'd rather FaceTime. Yeah, so apparently it's, I don't know why, but yeah, this is what I've learned from myself. This is what I've learned about myself. I thought I would get over my fear of talking to people on the phone, unknown people. Nope. I can do a podcast, still can't do a phone call. What about you?
Wow. I'm not surprised to learn this, but I've always been a procrastinator. But I think so. I have not in a weekly podcast since the first week of January 2018, regardless of what's going on in my world. Could be like, deathbed, food poisoning, whatever's going on. I have not missed a Friday episode. Sometimes I've not posted it till noon on the Friday. Normally I post on Thursday night, and then midnight I have them roll over. And it doesn't matter how early I record things. I could have 5 or 6 episodes in the bag. I'm still not producing it until late on Thursday. And it's kind of like, well, I rarely make plans for Thursday night. Now, when I'm traveling and stuff like that for work, often I've recorded stuff from hotel rooms. I have pre-recorded some things. I've done, all kinds of stuff. So I think what I learned about myself is that I don't think I will ever resolve my procrastination issues. What I do know about myself, and I play to this strength, is I work to deadline. And this is just, and so if my deadline is I've made a commitment to who have I made the commitment to? Well, to my listeners, right? But really, it's not like they're going to get upset if it's a day late or I miss a week or I decide to take a vacation or something. But I think the deadline is so critical to me, which is why, I've got 2 books right now that I haven't written that are up for pre-order for early 2021. I hope I write them. I know I'm going to, right? So I think I've just reaffirmed the fact that I'm never not going to be a procrastinator. That's my superpower. So.
I love that. But the thought of having to do it in a hotel room gives me hives.
But the audio doesn't come out that well, right? Because you can't control the sound as well. Even though I've traveled with the little mic, I actually have a little bag, which it's all like it wraps and protects it to travel with it. I'm thinking of getting a second mic just for travel, because then I don't have to disconnect it from the mechanical arm.
I love it. Okay, what's your favorite thing about podcasting?
I think my favorite thing is hearing from somebody that I have never met, or maybe only met in passing quickly at a conference somewhere, and hearing that an interview I did with somebody or a reflection I made, that it actually helped them, that it actually inspired them. Honestly, I know it's why we write to touch people, not not in an icky way. we write to touch other, like our stories, and will resonate with somebody emotionally. It'll do something. It'll lift them up. It'll bring them down. Whatever it is we want them to do. And when I learned that something that I spent time and energy and love and passion on, when I learned that it actually helps someone else, that powers me, that fuels me, and that's my favorite thing. How about you? What's your favorite thing?
It's kind of similar, I would say. So I love that the conversations that I have with very amazing people in the industry, every single episode will produce a golden nugget. So it doesn't, within that 60 minutes, it might be 1 nugget, sometimes it's 10 nuggets, and also that every listener will take a different nugget from it. But right. I love that these big conversations create these tiny, what's the word? Epiphanies almost, that can change an author's whole career trajectory. And I love that I get to share that and give that, that's something that we give and put into the community, and that they, and I guess also that people do come back and say that, but I have spoken to so many people that have quite literally changed the direction that I was going in. They've given me, huge craft improvements just from these tiny little nuggets. And that I can help other people by creating these in these conversations. That's what I love the most.
That is awesome. That is awesome. It's time for me to ask you a question. Sacha, why do you think rebellion is important? Obviously it is important, but why is it important?
I think that rebellion is so deeply entwined in creativity that they are almost one and the same. And I think that every single creative is a rebel, because the act of bringing something out of nothing, the act of putting your thoughts and your words and your story and your spin out into the world, which may or may not make people happy. They may hate your side of the story. They may desperately love your side of the story. I think every single word that we put out there is an act of rebellion, in a sense. I also think rebellion is so important because it is at the root of all change. So, we wouldn't have an indie community if it weren't for the small acts of rebellion that led to people publishing independently. So I think rebellion is at the root of everything good in this world. I think it is everything. It is everything that we need to solve all of our problems in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. When you go back to biological, our species wouldn't exist if not for rebellion at the molecular or biological level, as mutations and adaptations that changed and became something bizarre and strange and new and unique. So yeah, I honestly agree, and I think so much good can come out. So bad too, but so much good can come out of that. And there's also this. Without rebellion, it's complete compliance. And I think when I reflect back on my university years, I took English language and literature, so one would assume that I learned a lot about the masters and about the writer, literature, and society, and all of those things. But what I really learned, the biggest takeaway, was critical thinking. Not to just accept something that I'm told, but to actually analyze it and understand the source of where it's coming from, so I can try desperately, especially in these divisive times. I know where I stand, but I am also very aware of my own confirmation bias about everything. And so I try to look at it and say, why did I like that? Oh, because it confirmed everything I believed in. Okay, sure. But why else did I like? What about it? Or why didn't I agree with that? Well, because of this. Oh, do I need to read more? Do I not understand this? And I think rebellion and critical thinking are critical, because you have to understand why the change is necessary in order to move forward potentially. So yeah, I mean, very similar to your reasoning there.
Why do you think, as a society, we are so compliant? And this is completely ad hoc.
Yeah,
I know I haven't
yeah.
prepared you for this, but why do you think we are?
Well, I'm Canadian, so it's very much just a people pleaser, right? I just want people to be happy and not be upset, and right. So oftentimes you just kind of go with it. And again, I mentioned just finishing reading White Fragility, and I recognize all of those times that I was compliant because I just wanted to save the feelings of another white person. Because if I'd said something, it would have interrupted and made everyone uncomfortable. Well, damn it, why did I do that? Why did I perpetuate the supremacy in a small? It sounds like, and again, not seeing us as bad people, but why did I do something like that? Or why didn't I speak out about sexism or any of those things? So I think those little rebellions, which bring us, it's kind of discomfort, can cause growth. And so I reflect on times when I had been called out for things I had said and didn't realize it had been offensive to someone else. And I appreciate desperately the courage that the person who called me out on it said, even though I can look back 30 years and think of something that somebody said to me and I went, oh, I didn't take that the right way. I need to contact them and apologize and thank them for calling me out on it. It took me 30 years to figure out what I said was wrong or how I had approached it was wrong. So I think, I think that's important.
Mm.
We're getting deep here.
I know we are, but I think it's so important because, I genuinely think that we are bred as a people to be compliant because there is protection in numbers, stay with the pack. But you never see a successful person as part of the pack. They always stand out. They are always rebels. They are always leaders. And therefore, you have to embrace your inner rebel if you want to make it. But so I guess this, and I think it's my question, I forget who's doing what now, but I think this leads us to the final question, and I don't know my answer to this, but what kind of rebel are you?
It's funny. I don't know what kind of rebel I am, but I understand in the publishing industry, I have consistently looked at the way things are and said, this is bullshit. It does not need to be this way. What if it were this way? And I honestly think that how I've gotten to where I've gotten, not that I'm anything big, but how every single step in the evolution of where I've gotten to in this industry has been not being satisfied with the way things are, that we need something in place. And so the type of rebel I've been is I've questioned the status quo, and yet not just punched against it for the sake of breaking it, but punching against it with a goal to make things better or to change things in whatever small steps, whether that's using print on demand technology, whether that's using digital. I mean, one of my very first acts that I can remember was being the manager who wouldn't sit on his hands, being the manager who wanted to be able to do every single task that he assigned to his staff members. To me, that was really, really critical, that I could understand what they were doing. Self-publishing my first book in 2004, when all of my friends who were full-time authors making a living off this says, don't self-publish. It's the best way you can ruin your career. And I said, I'm doing it. And here's why. But I had reason. It wasn't just because I was being a pig-headed. It's because they had already been published in small press magazines. And so they'd already been edited. So they'd already been curated. So I kind of had that stamp of approval that people tend to want. That's what publishing is for a lot of authors who are already successful independently. So I think I'm the kind of rebel who makes those small steps, or wants to make those small steps to make things better. What about you? Have you thought about what kind of rebel you actually are, as opposed to just troublemaker?
Yes. Yes, well, I think I was a born troublemaker. It's really hard for me because I'm not sure if I was a born rebel or if I was made a rebel. And that's why I find this a hard one to answer, because part of me would like to think I'm a quiet rebel. So I do lots of small, quiet acts of rebellion against the system. But my experience through my life is not that. My experience is, and this is why I'm not sure if I was made a rebel, I didn't fit in because other people didn't let me fit in. And I wasn't white enough to be white. I wasn't brown enough to be brown. I wasn't, anything. I wasn't straight enough to be straight. I wasn't gay enough to be gay. I've never quite fit into any box or any group. And therefore, other people have made me I don't want to be like a woe is me, but I have never been in any of those communities or groups, and therefore that has pushed me to rebellion, because if you're not gonna include me, then give you the birdie and I'll go and do something by myself, and so I think I fully embrace rebellion in every single kind of form. Reverse psychology works really well on me. Because if you tell me not to do something, I'm going to go and do it. So yeah, I think I am one embodiment of rebellion. I am rebellion in all its forms because I don't fit in any particular group, ticking box. I don't any rule that's placed on me throughout my life, I have always made a point to try and break. So even though I would like to think I'm a quiet rebel, I think I'm probably a really loud rebel. So I haven't got as generous rebellion. I don't think I've necessarily ever I haven't done what you've done and gone down the route of trying to make things better for other people. I think I was both born a rebel and made a rebel. I don't know whether you believe in fate or whatever, and perhaps I could have gone a different path, but I didn't. I embraced, I think, the carrot that was, well, the bit of me that was born a rebel. I don't know that I have a as kind story as you, but I want a dad joke because I didn't get one last time.
Well, I just want to say congratulations, happy anniversary. And it's very, very obvious listening to you talk about the rebel that you are, why you chose the brand. I think when I think about that brand, it is so perfectly fitting for you and what you do and actually it's ironically, you don't recognize this, but what you are doing is you're helping other people by that rebellious spirit, by sharing those perspectives, and by boldly declaring those things. You're helping empower other authors. You're probably just not recognizing that. So thank you for that.
Now, that means a lot. Thank you.
I think about the mountain that you have climbed and the mountains that you help other authors and other creatives climb. And did you know that jokes about rebels who scale mountains, they're not just funny, they're hilarious.
That's so bad. I love it. I was waiting for this the whole time. I love dad jokes. There's a joke. I'm sorry. It was a good one. I liked it. And I can't believe, I'm literally crying. I can't believe you crafted it about rebels, you absolute legend. There's a whole joke between me and my wife because I don't understand jokes ever unless they're a dad joke.
Really?
And then, I just don't get jokes. I'm that person that the conversation has moved on and 5 minutes later I will laugh when I finally worked out what the joke was, which is why I love dad jokes so much, because they're always a play on words, which is why I can understand them.
Right, yeah.
But
okay, well, that's good. That explains why, right? Because they're in your wheelhouse, right?
exactly yeah, so thank you for that. You've made my day.
Awesome. Well, again, congratulations. And I'm taking this damn podcast over, at least temporarily, to say, Sacha, where can people find out more about you and the Rebel Author podcast?
Oh, okay. Yes, of course. So sachablack.co.uk, that's Sacha with a C. If you'd like to interact with me, then Instagram is your best bet. And I am at Sacha Black Author. And you can listen to the podcasts basically on any podcatcher. I'm pretty sure I've now got distribution on anything. So just type in the Rebel Author podcast and you should find me.
Awesome. Thanks for taking over.
Thank you. Wait, no. Yes, too right. I will take over forever. Hello, Reflectives. This is still Sacha Black. Seeing as I've stolen Mark's show, I'm also going to steal his reflections. There were so many poignant things said in this chat. I think we got really deep and I loved the chat because of that. But there were two things that hit home in a really significant way. And I think I am going to look at them, try and embed them and see what I can do to take them forward and impact my business and career too. The first one was that small acts have big consequences. Before we recorded, Mark and I didn't actually discuss our answers to these questions. And yet, despite that, we both chose Rosa Parks independently as the rebel that we most loved from history. I think there's a reason for that. I think that what she did was so phenomenally revolutionary. She quite literally changed the world forever. And yet, the actual action she took of simply not standing up and not giving up her seat is so small. I think we often forget or perhaps take for granted the impact that we can have on others and the world around us. If we smile, others smile around us. It's infectious. People can't help it. That's an impact. We are leaving a mark on others. If we're kind, others generally are kind around us. Mark said, each one of us, every single person listening, is an expert in something. You have more knowledge than others on a topic. So my challenge to you is, what small thing can you do or can you give to the world? What small act, be it from your expertise or a random act of kindness, can you do this week that might change someone's world forever? We can't all impact the entire planet in the way that Rosa did, but we can impact somebody else's life in the same way that she did. The next thing I wanted to reflect on is what Mark said about discomfort. I think his exact words were, discomfort can cause growth. And I don't think there's ever a truer word said. We're writers, yes? And so it is quite literally our job to put our heroes through extreme discomfort in order to make them grow enough they grow through their flaws and can defeat the villain. And yet so many of us, and me included at times, and I'm sure Mark would agree with this too, we don't put ourselves through discomfort. It's easy to stay in our little bubble, our circle of comfort. You know, it's scary and it's hard when we push ourselves, when we do get and feel discomfort because we're challenging ourselves. But it also helps us to grow and develop. And like the hero in a novel, nobody ever grows or defeats the villain unless they do go and get through discomfort. So I guess that's my second challenge to you this week. Take a look at your life, your business, and your writing craft. Ask yourself whether or not you're in your comfort zone. And if you are, what small act, what small action, what small thing can you do this week to create some more discomfort in your life? I would love to know if you do actually do either of these acts. I will look in the comments. So yeah, please do let me know, and let me know the impact it has on either your life or somebody else's.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.